All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time for us to now hand over to Peter Ndoro. We'll put you in his hands for the rest of the broadcast. And his guest is, of course, the Minister, Des van Rooyen. He's in charge of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. He's also got Andries Nel, the Deputy Minister, and Obed Bapela, the other Deputy Minister. They're discussing 15 years of the democratic local government. Here we go. Peter Ndoro, good morning to you and your guests.
A very good morning to you, Leanne, and thanks for tuning in wherever you may be watching across South Africa and indeed across the continent on Channel 404. Thank you so much. This is the venue for the latest in the series of New Age business briefings brought to you by the SABC, and today very kindly sponsored by Eskom. And the Ministry or the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs is in focus. But I guess as a backdrop to that, really is about 15 years of democratic local government. That's been the journey that we've been on, and we'll explore that as we approach the local government elections that are going to be taking place on the 3rd of August. And there are a number of issues on the table that we're going to be discussing, and would love you to be part of that conversation. Of course, those local government elections that we're talking about. We're also talking traditional affairs. That's something that's particularly poignant in our time, given the initiation season that's taking place and some other issues, and also the roles of our traditional leaders. When we talk about local government, how are they involved? What's their role? Municipal demarcation, that's also been a topic of discussion in recent times, and we'll unpack that for you. And also there's something called the Integrated Urban Development Framework. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's something that very definitely affects you, and we'll find out how. We'll get the details of that, because there have been quite a few developments on that plan. All right, let's meet the panel that's going to help us with this conversation. But remember, you can be part of it as well at Morning Live SABC, hashtag TNA BizBrief. That's our Twitter handle, where you can send through your questions and your thoughts. But let's say good morning to our panel, and we welcome Minister. Thank you very much indeed, the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, the Honourable Des van Rooyen. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Peter, and thank you very much for having us. And a very good morning also to my fellow panelists and, of course, our guests and our viewers at home.
And one of the Deputy Ministers of COGTA, the Deputy Minister Obed Bapela, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you very much, Molweni, Dumelang, Absheni. Wherever you are in South Africa, we are here to talk to you.
You forgot to say, how's it?
How's it? And in the COGTA, he's the Minister of COGTA.
Yes.
I'm responsible for the tar in it.
Oh,
and then
right.
he is more the cock.
The cock. Okay, well, let's meet the Deputy Minister of COG, the Honourable Andries Nel. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Welcome.
No, good morning, and thank you very, very much for this wonderful opportunity to interact around local government, which is the sphere of government that is closest to all of us. Everything that happens in our country happens within a municipality. So we're very happy to be here to share and to talk about that.
Great, thank you very much, and we certainly look forward to hearing about some of the initiatives that you particularly are responsible for. And next to you is the chairperson of the Municipal Demarcation Board. I would say maybe a few years ago, nobody even knew that your department existed. But in recent times, you've been in the headlines quite a bit. So Ms. Jane Thupana, thank you very much for joining us. And perhaps you can unpack some of the work that you do, the importance thereof, and what role it plays, particularly as we start making our way towards another set of local government elections. Welcome to you.
Good morning, Peter, and good morning to the rest of South Africa, and thanks for inviting us to the homes of all South Africans. We are the Municipal Demarcation Board, as I represent that board, an independent constitutional institution tasked with the mandate to determine and redetermine municipalities throughout the Republic. And as you know, very recently we had concluded on the delimitation of wards, specifically the geopolitical spaces within which South Africans need to be going out to be active during these local government elections to elect their representatives.
All right, we're going to unpack all of that just now, actually, because we need to know how you got to that, how are they demarcated, and why there's so much unjoy for some people, and some of this a lot of joy. Okay, but Minister, let me start with you. 22 years into democracy, but we're celebrating 15 years of democratic local government. Perhaps some people at home don't understand that journey, but take us through that journey and your opening thoughts as we start heading towards more local government elections.
Thank you, Peter, once more. It has been a transition that I term a successful story to tell. Moving from apartheid system of doing things to a new democratic order of doing things. To me, it has been a very, very successful story that we can relate to our people, but also we can relate to the world. I mean, guiding this success story, as we are all aware, is a noble constitution that espouses provision of basic services as basic rights. And of course, taking from that, I mean, since the establishment of this system that has proven to be a working system of local government, we have been able, as the government of the day, to ensure that we provide basic services to our people. In this 15 years period, I think the statistics were outlined earlier, we were able to ensure that we increase access to basic services like water. People in the past, as you are all aware, before 94, people used to share water with animals from the streams. We have changed that. We have given our people dignity. We have made a point that they have access to water. We went further to make sure that we increase access to sanitation services. By that doing, we have restored a lot of dignity to our people. I mean, there are many stories that can be told, horrible stories that can be told around how provision of sanitation services was, of course, offered to our people during the dark days of apartheid. We have extended access, I mean, to many households on electricity. I mean, people knew nothing about electricity in the past, but today, millions of our people are enjoying that. They are living in comfort. We have extended shelter to some of the people who didn't even think that they will at any given moment of their lifetime have shelter, I mean, to accommodate their families or maybe to lead their lives comfortably. We have done that. And hence I'm saying this has been a success story. As if that was not enough. I mean, the systems that we have created of local government has went further to make sure that we expose our people through our information communication technology infrastructure. Roll out of that infrastructure, we expose our people to the world. Our people, if you are to compare South Africa with other developing or maybe with its peers, you will realize that the extension of internet services to our people has been very, very massive. We have rolled out ICT infrastructure quite impressively. And we have done a lot, Peter, and our people at home in this particular period. But then we will be mistaken. We will be mistaken to think that in just a short period of 15 years through this local government system, we'll be able, I mean, to reverse the mess that has been created by more than 300 years of colonization and more than 3 decades of apartheid within that short period. We still have many challenges that are facing our communities. We still have many challenges facing our municipalities. I think those challenges ranges from issues of, for historical reasons, of course, institutional capacity, but also environmental capacity, because as you know, most of our municipalities were thrown into the deep end, where they were, I mean, no one was thinking that they will emerge to be successful institutions that will champion the development of the lives of our people here, more especially majority of our people here in South Africa. But that's a challenge that we are still faced with. I mean, when I'm referring to environmental capacity, I'm referring here to issues like the economic base of most municipalities is almost non-existent. How do you expect to build a sustainable and viable municipality on an economic base that is not there? There's no revenue base. As a result, we are faced with challenges of payment of services, which is a perennial problem since we have taken over this particular government. But also, linked to that, it's difficult for us to lay the necessary expertise to some of these municipalities because of the economic base that is non-existent.
Right,
you know?
right.
So there are so many challenges that they are still dealing with, and going forward, it's a given. As we have clearly indicated in the white paper of local government, that local government is central to the developmental state which our country, which our country has opted for. There's no way in which the country is going to succeed if our municipalities are not succeeding. So local government municipalities are at the epicenter of our national development agenda. So we are calling upon all our people, because this is not only going to take the government to reverse this misery that our country has been thrown into by apartheid. It's not going only to take the government alone. We need all stakeholders to come on board. The private sector, the citizen. We need active citizenry to take this agenda forward. You know, we need our communities to be on board. And of course, that's why we are saying together we can move this particular agenda forward.
All right. You've mentioned a lot of things there, and hopefully during the course of the conversation we'll unpack a lot of those, the successes as well as the challenges. Let me turn to you, Deputy Minister Bapela, and I know that Traditional Affairs is the main hat that you're wearing, and I perhaps if you could just give us an overview of some of the more important issues that are sitting at your desk right now, given the backdrop of these local government elections that are on the horizon.
So thank you very much, Peter. We have a slogan in the department that says local government is everybody's business. We live, we work, we play in a local government sphere. No one lives up on air. We all go back to where we get municipal services. In the past, traditional leaders used to be the providers of quite a number of services in the rural areas, but through the negotiations, the white paper and the constitutional negotiations, the white paper on local government then emerged and say all-to-all municipality, meaning everybody therefore has to live in a municipality. The authority of the provider of the services will be municipalities, taking away those functions from traditional leaders. They have to exist in that particular system. But they are also an authority on themselves on customary issues, as Chapter 12 of the Constitution indicates and subscribes. And therefore, in those particular there's a customary way of life, or an African way of life. There are traditional issues that then they practices and exercises. They need to ensure, therefore, that they are done within the conscripts of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The initiation is but one of them, obviously, which is now giving us a problem with deaths of initiates every year. We are coming up with a law which is going to Cabinet and then very soon to Parliament before the end of the year to criminalize the illegal schools in the main, because most of the deaths occurs there. And then the virginity testing is another issue that has wrapped its head now. And we are arguing and say it's a right of people to do so, as provided for and protected for in the Constitution, Chapter 10, through the Commission for Cultural, Religious and Linguistics, that every South African must have a right to practice their own cultural traditions without prejudice by anybody. However, the issue of the virginity test, for others they say is good, others they say no. And we say let it be a pro-choice rather than a ban on it. Those who love it, let them follow it. Those who don't want it, and also let them not be forced to do it. So those are the issues that are before us. But however, there are other developmental issues that are rising now. Traditional leaders own the land, and they are claiming more land. By 2019, I don't know how much of South Africa will have been claimed by the traditional leaders. And very big lands that are claiming, approaching and encroaching on the cities themselves. Once they claim that land, what's going to happen? That's the issue that South Africa must also debate. But then, and then now municipalities are growing, also populations are growing. So the land use has to be something that we ought to look at. So the traditional leaders participate in municipalities, particularly in the rural municipalities where they are, and also in the district level municipalities. And then we have been encouraging it through Structures Act, Municipality Structures Act, Section 81, where we want to see that model of cooperation existing, so that when land is needed, municipal and the traditional leaders can work together towards the development. And the new phenomenon now is mineral wealth that is being discovered in traditional communities. And then the minings are operating, poor people are poor. What is happening there, we're also going to be focusing on that as part of the development agenda of South Africa, as the minister has alluded to.
Okay, so quite an agenda of work that's on your table, and again we'll unpack that during the conversation as well. Let me turn to you, Deputy Minister Andries Nel. You've got a number of things on your table, particularly as we continue to build our cities and our towns, and I'm particularly interested in this integrated urban development framework. So that's at an advanced stage now, I believe.
Well, in fact, the Integrated Urban Development Framework was adopted by Cabinet on the 26th of April, and it was announced by the President to the nation on the 27th of April, very, very appropriately on Freedom Day. The Integrated Urban Development Framework responds to two big challenges that we face. The one is urbanization, the other is dealing with apartheid spatial patterns. In terms of urbanization, the world is urbanizing extremely, extremely fast. The UN tell us that 54% of the world's population are already living in urban areas. That's projected to go up to 66% by 2050. That means 2.5 billion more people living in cities and towns throughout the world. 90% of that 2.5 billion will be in Africa and in Asia. In South Africa, 63% of people are already living in urban areas. That's set to increase to 71% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Now, there are tremendous advantages to urbanization. Economic advantages, social advantages, advantages of building social cohesion. In fact, already 44% of South Africa's gross domestic product is produced in our 8 metropolitan municipalities. On the other hand, if we don't manage urbanization well, it poses serious, serious risks to our citizens. Large concentrations of urban poverty, informal settlements with a low quality of life, environmental degradation. So it's very, very important for us as a country to get urbanization right. And that is why our National Development Plan devotes an entire chapter to transforming our national space economy. And this integrated urban development framework responds directly to that chapter in the NDP. And we believe that it represents a new deal for South Africa's cities and towns. But importantly, the document recognizes that there's an inextricable link between urban development and rural development. Cities and rural areas need each other for the development of the nation. And the Integrated Urban Development Framework puts forward that perspective very strongly. It's also linked strongly to the department's Back to Basics program, because in order to manage urbanization well, our municipalities need to be capacitated. Of course, managing urbanization is a shared responsibility across national, provincial, and local government, but municipalities have a special responsibility. So those pillars of Back to Basics that talk about putting people first, ensuring delivery of a basic basket of services, building strong institutions, ensuring sound financial management, those pillars all speak directly to the capacity of our municipalities to manage urbanization.
All right, fantastic. So again, a lot to unpack and explain further, and I'm sure a lot of people have questions. But the center of all of this is that these municipalities have to have boundaries, and we need to know which area that we belong to, who we're going to be voting for, and where. And that's part of your work, Chairperson, as the Municipal Demarcation Board. Just give us an overview of what you do and how you come up with the borders that you end up drawing for us, and perhaps why sometimes some people think they're great and others think this is not so great.
The Municipal Demarcation Board draws boundaries in a manner that's explained in very simple terms by the law. The legislation that guides how municipalities need to be demarcated. We have in 2 pieces of legislation, the Municipal Structures Act outlining how you categorize municipalities, and largely the criteria for classification of an area as a metro would lie in that piece of legislation, and we have other criteria that are explained in details in the Municipal Demarcation Act. Now, primarily, whenever a boundary is being determined, the key objectives guide this, and those objectives being that we need to make sure that the entities that are being crafted are able to discharge in terms of their constitutional mandate. So the bigger objectives of municipal sustainability, good governance, would need to take precedence whenever we draw such boundaries, before we could even look at the independent factors that we have to look at whenever we draw boundaries. Now, just to go quickly talk about the wards, those, as I indicated, are drawn each and every time there has to be a local government election. The wards need to be drawn. They have to be redrawn time and again as the law prescribes, and I know many people are unhappy with this because it's quite disruptive if you have to be drawing these boundaries each and every 5 years, but they have to be done before an election in order to prepare the areas where citizens would need to elect their representatives. Again, the criteria are quite laid out in terms of the Act, and often those criteria would not give joy to the people. For example, people would be wanting to say, look, we are this community, we wouldn't want to be separated by this boundary. We are a village, we are the settlement that doesn't need to be separated by a boundary. But there is a norm that guides as to how big in terms of population, actually not statistical population, but the number of registered voters, how big a ward should be, so that you don't have wards that are inequitable in a specific municipality. So that becomes your key criterion, meaning that if you don't make the numbers to create a ward, you'll keep on throwing your net further to draw in sufficient registered voters to create a ward. And that is why in sparsely populated areas like your rural areas, and if you go to the Northern Cape, for example, you'd end up having a ward that stretches over 100 kilometers, whereas if you go to the city of Johannesburg, a few blocks might make a ward, because it is the number of registered voters you're chasing when you're making or when you're crafting a ward. So those are some of the things that often make people unhappy. Why this abrupt, the boundary coming here? Of course, other secondary factors that we would consider is whether people would access their voting stations quite easily when you have created a ward. And this, by the way, takes into consideration that in terms of the law, wards are made precisely to facilitate an election. There are, of course, other elements. You would know we recently had a conference and we were talking to people. And there are other very important factors that came to the fore, which we also observed as we were engaging with the people over the past 2 years, that they are quite important functions for wards. Municipalities use this as service delivery units, as planning units, and those very important factors are not considered in terms of the law, meaning that whenever you go out to create a ward, there's no criteria that would make you consider the service delivery elements the disruptive nature. If someone thought I was on queue to expect to have, I was quite advanced in terms of the housing development, I was going to get an RDP house, and suddenly, or a clinic maybe I was going to be served by a clinic that is planned to be built nearby. And suddenly you find that you're no longer in Ward 5, you are in Ward 11 when we create new wards. And those are elements that are quite disruptive that came out during the conference, and they're quite important elements that have to be taken into consideration, probably through review of the legislation. But at the moment, the board works within the parameters of the law. And other elements that came out quite sharply are issues of public participation, stakeholder engagements through this process of boundary delimitation and determination. And quite strong views came out, and there's definitely a need for the law to take into consideration how best do we engage with the public if we are in the process of deepening our democracy. The electorate is quite mature. We are the same board that has been operating since 1999, but the maturity of our democracy require that we begin to engage through different means that are available, considering also we having areas that are a bit disadvantaged than the other. How can we use technology to deepen this consultation as we embark on the process of crafting boundaries that should be sustainable and create more stability within the local government sector.
Okay, so we'll unpack that, and we've seen a lot of anger, violence that has been associated with this. We'll unpack all of this after this break. Don't forget, Morning Live SABC, that's our Twitter handle. If you have a contribution to make, question to raise, you've heard some opening comments now, perhaps that's provoked some thoughts. We'd like to hear them from you. And we'll be back right after this. Stay with us.